Hello everyone and welcome to Getting Started with Unreal Engine 5. Unreal Engine 5 is the next major evolution of Unreal used for games, real-time visualizations, and immersive interactive experiences. It empowers artists and creators across all industries to achieve stunning real-time 3D content with great fidelity and flexibility than ever before. This series of videos will walk you through the basics of Unreal Engine 5 and explains how to download and create the project, how to interact with user interface. I will go over movements, viewport settings, introduction to materials and PBR, post-production, lighting with Lumen, landscape tools, and how to use Megascan objects and so much more. So hopefully by the end of this series, you have the confidence to start with your Unreal Engine 5 and produce amazing work. This topic has been requested by many of you and I have a lot to cover. So let's get started. Alright, let's start with the very first step, how to install Unreal Engine 5. You need to start with Epic Games website. So if you use Google, type in Epic Games, download, and it takes you to Epic Games Store page. Now at the time of the recording, the page looks like this, but by the time you watch this video, you may look into a slightly different page. Regardless of the design, you should have access to download Epic Games Launcher. Also, it does help if you go and sign in with your Google account, or you can create an Epic Games account and log in, because very soon you do need to use that username password for your bridge plugin. Now I successfully logged in. I can go ahead and download the launcher and install Epic Games. Next, go ahead and launch Epic Games. You can see in the very first page we have access to Unreal Engine 5. That link is available to us and that will take us to the download page. I've got samples, that's my next tab, and again the interface may be slightly different by the time you install Epic Games, but the functionality remains the same. We've got some feature samples, like for example I've got Matrix Awakens scene in here to download and to practice. We've got some content example, broadcast example, so on and so forth. Now we have Marketplace, and that Marketplace allows us to download free or available to purchase scenes. So you can see I've got plenty of scenes to choose from and they're all free. I can go and browse a particular material or scene or plugin that I would like to search for. This in particular goes over Unreal Engine 5 only and categorizes what you would like to find based on different categories. You've got free, where you only target free content, and you've got on sale, so on and so forth. So check that out. Library would be the one that you use the most, where it actually shows you the previous versions that you've installed, for example 4.27.2 or early access 2. And in my case, if I click here on this plus, I get access to Unreal Engine 5. Again, you can go ahead and install the version from here, or you can go to the news at this very moment and download it from this link. If you click on this link, that takes you to another page, whereas if you download it from here, or install it rather from here, you will stay in this page. You say that, all right, I agree with user license agreement, accept, and then you specify where you would like to install, and of course you would like to create a shortcut. You can create a shortcut with the by clicking on this tiny arrow and create a shortcut, but we might as well create a shortcut here and install, and yes, and that goes straight into my download page. If I click on the download page, you can see it's downloading. So we wait for Unreal Engine 5 to be downloaded properly, and then we can continue. So the installation process is done. Now I've got early access version 4 and version 5. And by the way, if you would like to tweak things a bit further, you can always go to options and install or uninstall certain features. For example, if you think having Unreal Engine 5 is unnecessary on these target platforms, you can go ahead and untick that and save some space here. Once you apply it again, uninstall certain features, so it will take time, but you will save hard space on that if that's the problem. Now via here, you can remove this version, you can create a shortcut we already have, and you can set as current. So that's what you would be launching every time you run Unreal Engine 5. I'm just going to go ahead and minimize this window and simply double click on the icon that has been created for us, and Unreal Engine project browser pops up. There's not much in there. We've got games where it goes over some presets here. It basically targets industries. So in games, you've got a blank scene, first-person shooter, third-person shooter, and these are great because you get a scale, proper scale, human scale that you can bring into your scene and adjust stuff based on that. We will do that in the future. We've got film where you get a blank brand new scene. If you are planning on doing any virtual production, so on and so forth, architecture and automotive product design and manufacturing. We are going to actually go with film and a blank scene. And right off the bat, I'm just going to create a folder, and we are going to continue with that folder structure for the remaining of these tutorials for this series. So I'm just going to click on the browse, go in here and create a new, and I'm going to call this UE5 lessons and select the folder. So that's going to be the folder that we will have. You can see I intentionally didn't maximize this window so you get to see the desktop as well. We have the folder created for us, and I'm going to name this project my very first project. And before I hit create, make sure that starter content is there. So it comes with a bunch of goodies, some models, some props, some textures that you can benefit from if you don't want to bring your own model right off the bat. And we are going to leave ray tracing as is because we are going to use Lumen very soon. We don't really need hardware rendering at this stage. I'm just going to go ahead and hit create. If you're running Unreal Engine 5 for the very first time, it may take time to compile shaders, so not to worry, just stay patient, and we will get into the user interface very shortly. And here we are. So this is the default user interface, and we have a bunch of buttons on the top, on the toolbar, a menu on the side, right hand side, and a collapsible menu at the bottom. That's the typical default user interface. At any point of time in the screen, you can just click and select an item. That item will be brought up into the word outliner, and we see the details of that item in the details and some attributes associated with the object that you have selected. So everything you see in the scene is selectable, and as soon as you select it, the item gets selected in the outliner and you see the attributes and specifications for it to change it. Very, very typical scenario where you have something selected in the scene, you change the attributes in the side menu bar. Now, we are going to get to what we're looking at here, but at any point of time, if you see it's just too much and the clutter is just overwhelming you, you can press the G key on your keyboard and hide them temporarily from your scene. You're not going to hide their functionalities in the scene. It's just the icon that goes away so you can focus more on the items you have in the scene. So far we don't have any items, so that's not a problem. But let's look at the toolbar. I'm going to press the G key to bring everything back. we need it right now. The first menu is the create menu, where anytime you would like to create something new, that's the drop down you go to. And it's actually a very thorough drop down where it goes through all the types of lights. We are going to talk about that. We're going to talk about types of rigs and cameras. We have access to solid basic primitives, some tools about virtual production, tools or nodes to be added to your scene as visual effects. We are going to use a lot of sky atmosphere, a lot of volumetric cloud. We have some volume nodes to deal with, and subclasses and all classes in here to deal with. Probably if we talk about virtual reality, then that's going to be our topic. I'm going to skip content and go into blueprints, and that's Unreal Engine's approach to visual scripting. We are going to dedicate at least a brief session on programming using graphs and nodes inside Unreal Engine. That's actually quite fun. And of course we have cinematic as well, where we add a level sequence. It's more of a timeline approach. If you have a camera, you would like to bake that and export that as a video, that's where we use this menu. We are going to get to all of these in details. And then of course we have different modes, and pay attention to the shortcut at the end of the tooltip, Shift 1 and Shift 2, Shift 3, so on and so forth. So this is the editing mode, and we spend majority of time in the editing mode to bring objects into the scene, to translate them, to dress the set, for lack of better word. And then every now and then we switch to landscaping editing mode to change the terrain. Let's say we go to foliage editing mode to add foliage into our scene. There are a few editing modes that we are going to look at in the future lessons, but at least for the first couple of sessions, we are going to predominantly stay in the default editing mode. At any point of time, if you change any of these by accident, just Shift 1 and it takes you back to where you are. We're not going to play the level because we don't have any interactivity at the moment, but if later on we go into blueprint and create some interactions between an object and a prop or so on and so forth, then you can press play and see the result. Also, it works really well with cinematic as well. Again, in future lessons we are going to talk about that. Also, we have session browser where we use multi-user browser, but again, it's too early to talk about any of that. Just so you know, this is useful as for if you're an intermediate or advanced user, but for a beginner, the majority of the time you stay in the default editing mode, Shift 1, and you will be using the create menu quite a fair bit. And of course, you save quite often. Hopefully you are not going to forget about that. Now let's go to the world browser, and I'm just going to drag that a little bit. You can see we don't have much to deal with. We have few lights, and the good thing about that is, if I just bring this one here so you get to see the type as well, we have lights, and we have one static mesh in the scene, which is this guy. So if I click on this, it says floor static mesh actor. So actor means that this guy is in this 3D scene and it plays a role, hence the actor word. But static mesh simply means that it's a polygon that you do often create in other software packages like 3D Max, Maya, Blender, Modo, so on and so forth, and you bring them in as a static mesh. Then we have player start. We're not planning on doing any interactivity. You can simply hide this sky sphere. If I turn this on and off, you can see we have indirect lights coming in. The sky dome, which is connected to our directional light, so I can actually turn those off, and you can see instantly we're losing the direct lighting setup, which is a directional light and a sky dome. And of course, I can go ahead and turn off the fog, our sky sphere, and all of a sudden we are in complete dark. So all of these nodes can be added through Create Light, and some of them can be added through visual effects. We will get to those nodes in our lighting session. For now, I'm just going to unhide all of these and moving on in here where we talk about transform. So basically whatever you select, I'm just going to select this static mesh in the scene. You can see I can translate that, rotate that, scale that this way. It talks about the nature of this object, static mesh, and that's the name for it, static mesh SM template map floor. Where to find it? If you click on this browser, the content browser pops up and it shows you the exact folder where this object is stored on your hard drive. So you can see in the hard drive, I have a folder called map templates. Under map templates, this object, which is a static mesh, is being stored. If you hover your mouse, you can look at the poly counts. You can even look at the complete source file and the extension, which is FBX. So it's very useful to kind of look any object up using the browser and sanity check its location. You can do the exact same thing with its material. So right now, as a checkerboard has been assigned to this material, but where this checkerboard is coming from, you click on this browser and it takes me to the engine material folder inside my hard drive. And these are all the starter pack content that I enabled to begin with. And here I have the default material stored for me. So again, very, very useful. And again, we do have physics where it kind of makes more sense if we bring in more objects, so we can talk about this lengthy scroll down a little bit more in the future. Now, let's get to the navigation and how we can scroll around and orbit around the scene, because that's the part that we haven't talked about yet. So let's get to that. Now, before I talk about navigation, I would like to introduce a very useful shortcut, and that is Control Spacebar. And that Control Spacebar brings the content browser. So when you look into content browser, you can look at the starter pack, engine content, and these are the content that Unreal Engine is creating for you. At any point of time, you can go in here and create a new folder here, or you can target starter content like so and create a content here. I'm just going to go to the root of the content and just right click on this and go new folder and call this reza underscore content spacebar. And from now on, if I have any content, I can just store this inside Reza content. It might be texture, it might be maps, it might be materials, it might be levels, so on and so forth. But for now, if I look into the starter content, I have a lot of contents to choose from. Let's say, for example, I can go to architecture and I've got a few props at my disposal. And I can just simply look at a prop, for example, door wall and door wall with different measurements. So I can kind of drag and drop that one into the scene. Now, how will I be able to look at that? How will I be able to navigate? It's actually very easy. Get to the habit of holding right mouse button. Why? Because with just holding right mouse button, you can start rotating around. With the object selected, you can press F and start rotating around. When you press F, you can actually hold down Alt left mouse button and rotate around the object. Right? Now, with the right mouse button selected, you can use Q to move down, press E to move up. So Q to move down, E to move up. You can also go W to move forward and S to move backward. So W to move forward, S to move backward, A to move left, and D to move right. All of this with left mouse button held down. So QEWSAD. Try to repeat that a few times, and believe me, it becomes second nature to you guys very quickly. Now, with that out of the way, let's bring in more objects into the scene and start dressing the set a little bit. And that gives me an opportunity to talk about how to create objects, how to move them around. All right, let's talk about how to transform objects. And to do that, I would like to bring more from our content drawer and just drag and drop one of these walls like so. Now, you may say, well, how can I remove this? You can remove it from here, or you can just select and press delete if you think the size is not correct. I can bring 400 to 300. I think that's the one that fits. And just drag and drop it here, and you can see we get transformation gizmos. Now, to move an object, I'm going to press F. To move an object, this one is kind of lining up perfectly, but to move, just in case, you can press W on your keyboard. To go with rotation, you can press E, and to scale, you press R on your keyboard. Of course, any object you select in your world outliner, you can have the transformation channels. You have access to transformation channels, and you can change stuff this way as well. But for now, let's say I would like to just scale it in Access a little bit, and then pressing W to move, and then bring it to the right place. Click away, go to content browser. Let's bring in more. Let's bring in another wall. I'm just going to select that wall in here and going to rotate and rotate it like so. W to move, and let's bring one with the window. Again, 300 to 400 is what I'm looking for. I'm just going to bring it W, letter E to rotate it, move it to place like so. I can even push that in ever so slightly, pressing F to make sure it's all lining up. No, it's not, because my rotation wasn't accurate enough. So you can see how simple that is to just drag and drop an object and get to the position that you want. Now, you may have noticed that when I'm bringing something, it snaps. So let's say I'm just going to bring a wall right here, and when I go to rotate it, you can see it snaps. This snapping comes from these snapping tools. For example, in rotation, I have 10-degree increments, which I can change by click on this snapping tool right here and say, you know what, I want 90 degrees. So from now on, if I were to rotate something, I'm rotating it only in 90 degrees. So it's actually quite useful to make use of snapping tools if the situation calls for it. But you do have that option both in scale, in rotate, and in move tool. Let's say I would like to scale it not with 0.25 increments. I can actually scale it with 1 unit. So from now on, if I press R on the keyboard, with the ceiling selected, I can actually scale it in 1 unit with just a single click. How useful is that? You can actually turn the whole thing off if you don't want. For example, if you think that, okay, the ceiling is a bit too long or too thick, you can just adjust it like that. Go into R to scale and adjust the thickness, adjust the height, so on and so forth. So scaling, something that I do use a lot. It adds to the accuracy in your scene, and if you think there is a situation where you want to use it, by all means do. That applies to objects and props when you translate them as well. For example, let's say I want to go to props, and let's bring a couple of props. Let's bring a door. I'm just going to select the door, bring it over, pressing F, using my rotation tools. So I'm just going to go in here and rotate it. And because the increment is set to 90s, it's a lot easier for me to basically rotate objects around. You can do the same thing with translate as well. For example, 5 units, 10 units, or go very, very fine, only 1 unit, and basically line up your object. I'm just going to continue with my scene assembly. I'm going to bring a door frame in here as well. And I'm going to enable my snapping 90 degrees and go with a much higher snapping value for my translate. And because these guys are coming from content browser, everything fits, and that's why I'm actually using this for this particular tutorial, because I really don't need to worry about the details too much. Everything just fits. You can bring a frame for a window, right? So I'm just going to press F, bring it in, and just ever so slightly translate it, and we have that. Let's bring in some furniture in, control space, just drag and drop the couch right here. Right off the bat, it's very big. You can actually resize it if you want. You can rotate it, and just that's how basically you dress the set. Control space to bring another one into the scene. Now, let's say I want to duplicate this guy and move it right in front of this chair right here. That's very easy. With Alt held down, you translate an object, and that's how you duplicate it. And you have 3 models in the scene. Let's say you would like to group these 3. Well, that's actually easy too. You just select all 3 either in your world outliner or in the scene, and simply press Ctrl G to group them. So the grouping is not going to work similar to other software packages. They're actually going to create a group node. From this point onward, you can just click on this group node and it selects what's underneath it. They don't necessarily go inside the group node, and that group node is not sort of collapsible, expandable type of fashion that you see in other software packages. At any point of time, if you want to ungroup, Shift G on your group node, and that group node will be removed from your outliner. Again, Control G and Shift G. I am actually going to Shift G to ungroup them so I can select them individually. Remember, if you're grouping them, Control G, then you kind of it's tricky to select them individually without selecting all the groups. So with that, what I usually do, if you want to select them individually, just Shift G to ungroup. And let's say one of these guys is just sort of hovering on the ground and you would like to place them on the ground. You can use that using a right click. So you select the model, right click, snapping, and you kind of snap to floor. Shortcut for it is letter N on the keyboard. So that is also quite useful. I'm just going to bring, let's say, a ceiling lamp to my scene, like so. Just add a little bit of personality to what I have, and maybe turning off the grid. I can kind of move that ever so slightly. I can actually increase the size of this guy and size of this wall right here and size of the window framing. Just give this little bit of personality, moving this down ever so slightly. And we can probably finish this by adding another wall. So I'm just going to go to architecture, bringing another wall into the scene. At any point of time, we can kind of move this forward and just readjust the scale and the size of your scene. Now let's talk about these buttons at the top of the viewport really quickly. So the first one is how you can see your scene from perspective, and Alt J to go to top, Alt Shift J to bottom, left Alt K, and front Alt H. I usually use Alt G for perspective, and to be honest with you, I didn't really memorize any of these, so Alt G is the one that I mainly use. Then we have view mode, how you would like to see your scene. So let's say I'm having this one and I'm going to kind of frame this right here. Let's actually bring in a coffee table really quick in here, and this time I'm going to use scale from this menu so you guys kind of see that you can do the exact same thing via here as well. And let's say we have this one and we're happy with it. The lit version is going to show us everything, lighting, material, so on and so forth. The unlit version only gives us the albedo. So if you in case would like to troubleshoot some materials, you usually go to unlit. And then we've got wireframe, where you just see the poly density. You go to detail lighting, and that just shows you the lighting side of things. And you've got reflections, only shows a specularity. So many of these guys are basically showing only part of the visualizations, mainly for debugging, so on and so forth. So most of the time you would like to have everything as lit. And then of course we have show, where you can hide or unhide certain stuff. You can turn off anti-aliasing, you can turn off your grid if you dislike it, and any other elements in the scene. Then in here we have the good old select and move, rotate, scale. We already know Q, W, E, R are the shortcuts for them. And then we have world space or local space. For if I select the chair and want to move it, I can move it in world axis. You can see I'm gonna rotate it a little bit. I'm pressing move tool. I no longer can move it straight. I'm moving it along the direction of the chair's normal. So it's a local translation as opposed to world translation. So just keep that in mind. I can toggle between them, and right now I can just move it straight into side to side, up and down, and left and right, whereas with this one I can only translate it via its local axis. We already know about snapping tools, and of course we have camera speed tool. If I hold down Alt S, you can see it's actually pretty quick for my taste. I can actually lower this down to 2, and holding down Alt and S, you can see it's much slower. And that's it's a preference thing. There is no really a magic number that you say, oh, this number is a good number, this number is going to work for you. You just need to know what number is going to work for you. Now we're towards the end of this lesson right here. You may ask, Reza, we talked about everything, but we still don't know how to apply material. Don't worry, next video is going to be about material attribute, material graph. But just so you know, if you would like to just drag and drop a simple material, we've got the material shelf at our disposal. We've got textures as well, where you find a texture and you basically just simply drag and drop a texture on a surface and you create that. But again, with regards to its attributes, with regards to the nature and the properties of the material, let's leave that for a next video. By the way, you can do the same thing in here as well, drag and drop a material in there, and not only you get the texture, but also you get the property of the material, all the reflection, roughness value, base color, so on and so forth. So very, very nice way of applying things to your model. And you can see right off the bat we're getting a kind of gorgeous looking material, and everything interacts with each other really, really well. All right, that should do it as a quick rundown on the user interface and how you get your head around this application first glance. Let's look into the next video where I talk about material, how to use material, how to use textures, and how to apply them to your model. Thanks again for supporting this channel and watching this video. Until the next video, see you guys soon.